Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Financial Literacy Fair. My name is Sunny Ravel, and I'm the founder of Financial Literacy Club at Howard High School. We're so excited to have you all here today. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us and investing in your future. This event is all about helping students like you build the skills and knowledge you'll need to make smart financial decisions, whether that's budgeting for college, understanding how credit works, or figuring out how to land your first job. The goal of this fair is to make financial literacy accessible, engaging, and actionable. You'll hear from an incredible guest speaker, explore interactive booths, and even have a chance to win some fun prizes and get to enjoy some snacks along the way. I want to thank the Glenwood Library for their willingness and help in hosting this event. I would also like to thank our planning team, as well as our amazing volunteers and booth leaders for their hard work. And of course, our guest speaker, Ms. Linda Bartlett, for sharing her time and wisdom with us. I'd like to invite Saya up here to talk a little bit about what she's doing.
Hi, thank you, Sunny, for the amazing speech. I'm Saya Macias, and I'm a student at Mary Church High School. So me and Sunny actually work together to plan this event. He has his Howard High School Financial Literacy Club, and I am currently in the process of registering a nonprofit, and it has a similar goal of trying to spread like financial literacy throughout the community and bring opportunities to students. His name is Investify. If you guys want to learn more about it, we'll talk about it at the booths, and you guys can always talk to me or Malika over there to get involved. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about Ms. Linda Bartlett here. She's the executive in residence of finance at Loyola University, Maryland, and spent over 20 years at Marriott International in top financial leadership roles. We're so thankful to have her here with us today. Let's give her a big round of applause.
First of all, I'd say that it says a lot that you would spend a Saturday afternoon at the library learning about financial literacy. I'm sure there are a lot of other things that you could have been doing today. So I'm really proud of you for taking the time to do it, whether you decided to do it on your own or whether you got a little bit of encouragement from Sune or from your parents. So good for you that you're here, because the sooner you learn more about financial literacy, I think the better off that you're going to be in the long run. So Sune gave me a brief introduction. I'll tell you a little bit more about my background. First of all, I am a proud native Baltimorean, so I'm from the area, but I have actually lived in Howard County for 30 years. And I actually currently live just about 2 miles down the road. So I'm local, this is my library, and I'm very invested in Howard County, and I love it here. In terms of my background and my experience, I grew up in a very middle-class family. My dad drove a cement truck. My mother worked in a bottle factory. I didn't have any peers that had gone to college, so I was a first-generation college student. Maybe some of you will be that as well. I was lucky enough to get accepted to the place where I teach today, which is Loyola University, Maryland. I was not an undergraduate finance major. I don't even think Loyola had a finance program then. I was actually an undergraduate accounting major. All right, I went to Loyola and got a degree in accounting and started off working at a firm that you might know today called PwC. It's an international public accounting firm. And I worked there for several years on the audit team and decided that while, accounting was okay and I enjoyed it, what I really grew to enjoy were transactions. So I decided to go back and get my master's degree at night at Loyola while I was working full time. And that's where you see the MSF in my title. That stands for Masters of Science in Finance. So I have a master's degree in finance, in addition to having a CPA, and I still do actively retain my CPA license, so I am still certified. In terms of my career, in addition to working at Coopers & Lybrand, I worked at companies like Stanley Black & Decker, which has a big presence here still locally. Who's heard of Jiffy Lube? Anybody heard of Jiffy Lube? Maybe you've had your oil change there? Yeah, so I was on a team that took Jiffy Lube public when it first went public. And then I heard a guy by the name of Bill Marriott speak at a business dinner, and moved by what he had to say that I had decided that I had to go to work for Marriott. So after applying a couple of times, Marriott finally hired me. They hired me on an accounting role. I really wanted to work in finance. And fortunately, I was able to work my way from an accounting role into a finance role later on. And then had the good fortune of having some really wonderful opportunities with Marriott. So I ran their financial planning and analysis team. I was CFO for their international lodging operations. And I ran mergers and acquisitions for a couple of years. So you all have heard of Ritz-Carlton. You heard of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company? So I was on the team that led Marriott to purchase Ritz-Carlton from the owner. Maybe if you heard of Renaissance Hotels, which used to be based out of Beijing. I was on the team that worked on Marriott's Renaissance acquisition. So I worked on some really big transactions. I left Marriott to work for another company locally who was looking for someone who had a skill set who knew how to take companies public. And that company's called Intelsat. Has anybody heard of Intelsat? Yeah, so do you know what Intelsat does? Anybody? So they actually build, launch, and operate satellites. And so some of you maybe perhaps listened to Sirius XM radio. Some of you? You've heard of Sirius XM? So the satellite transmission for Sirius XM is actually being managed by Intelsat. So I took Intelsat public, was very tired after that because it's very hard, it's very exhausting to take a company public. And I decided that I was gonna take off for a couple of years and maybe I was gonna go back to work, maybe I wasn't. I got a call from an old colleague who ran human resources for one of the largest public charities in the world called the Pew Charitable Trusts. And they were looking for a CFO, and so I functioned as a CFO for Pew for about 5 years. And one of the most fun things I got to do in that job was I managed an investment portfolio of over $1 billion. So that's a lot of responsibility, but it's also a lot of fun. And then as my career started winding down a little bit, I thought, well, what can I do where I can still stay active and give back? And I had a wonderful opportunity to teach part-time at Loyola. And I liked it so much, unfortunately, they liked me that they asked me if I would teach full-time as an executive in residence. So how do you think an executive in residence might differ from a very traditional professor? Any idea? What's different? So most professors are very long and deep, right, in teaching and research and scholarship. You don't see any of that in my background heretofore. So one of the wonderful things about Loyola's program is in all of the business disciplines, they have both traditional teaching professors as well as executives in residence. And as an executives in residence, what we have is we bring many years of experience in corporate America, right? We haven't been teaching, we've been out getting real life experience in jobs in corporate America, and we bring that real life experience back to the classroom, right? So what's wonderful, I think, about that blend is that you get professors who are very, wide and deep in teaching, right, and in research, but then you also get the practical of those people who have actually worked in business for many years. So some of my peers can tell you maybe what the 5 or 6 ways are that you would value a company if you were thinking about acquiring it. I can say, yeah, that's all great, but in real life there are probably only 2 that get used, and let me show you how they work. So I kind of bring the pragmatic, right, as opposed to the theoretical. I really bring the pragmatic. So I love teaching. I'm delighted to be here today. I'm so glad that Sune contacted me. This is the kind of thing that I love to do. You're not going to leave today being a financial expert, but you're going to have hopefully a little bit more background in finance, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of the things that we talked today to sort of plan the next several years of your life. Okay? So there is a copy of the presentation on your desks or on your lap, and you're welcome to follow along. I would really like for this to be as interactive as possible, so I really want you to ask questions as we go through. And I will ask you questions, and hopefully you will respond to my questions, okay? So we're here today to talk about financial literacy. What do you think financial literacy is? see. How did I articulate financial literacy? So I kind of coined it into 2 words here, right? Hello, how are you? Thank you for coming. So let's start with finance. We'll talk about finance and then we'll talk about literacy. So finance involves the management of money, which you were alluding to, right? Such as budgeting and saving and investing and spending and borrowing, right? All of those things. Literacy, right, relates to knowledge and competence. So what we're really looking to do today is increase your knowledge and competency in all the things that involve management of money, okay? So did you know that April is Financial Literacy Month? That's probably not an accident. I'm guessing that's because something interesting always happens on April 15th. What is it? Taxes are due. Yeah, tax day. I'm sure it was scheduled that way purposefully. So why do we think it's important for you to be financially literate? Yeah, hi. Have a question?
I was just gonna answer the question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's important for you to be financially literate because if you like spend too much, you can like you can lose a lot.
You could go bankrupt, couldn't you, if you spend too much? Yeah, here, that deserves prize. Yeah, you could go bankrupt. So, it's an important life skill, right? It prepares you to be financially independent and make good choices regarding your money. Your parents love you, but they don't want to support you financially for the rest of your lives, right? They want you to learn to be financially independent. It helps you to build a stable and secure future, right? It increases your self-confidence. You're feeling like you have enough money in the bank, you're feeling pretty good, right? Feel pretty good on the day you get a paycheck. It reduces your stress, right? If you know that you have enough money, if you know that you have enough money to retire, you're not going to be nearly as stressed out, right, about your job and about your life. So the quality of life is better. And it can increase your personal wealth for you and future generations for the rest of your family. So one of the nice things about positions in finance, and I'm not going to apologize for this, is that they pay fairly well, right? You know, you work hard, right? You get to earn a lot of money, and one of the great things about that is you may find yourself in a position where you can put some money to the side for your kids, so you can make their lives a little bit maybe less stressful. So all great things about why it's important for you to be financially literate. So what are the principles of financial literacy? Well, here are what I think they are. One, you want to earn, right? You have to get money. You get money by earning money, right? And when you have money, what you want to do is you want to budget for it. You want to budget over the short term, and you want to plan for the future over the medium to long term. And by the way, while you're earning, you also want to save. You don't want to spend it all. You want to manage your expenses so you can live within your means. Once you start saving, you want to invest your money in things that will generate strong returns. If you have to borrow, you want to be able to manage your debt, right? You don't want to have more debt than you can pay, because if we have more debt than we can pay, we go bankrupt, right? You also want to protect your assets from risks. And then finally, you want to be able to give back if you're able to do that, you know, to the rest of your community or to things that are important to you. So how do we earn? Right? You're all still pretty young. Yeah, how do we earn? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe having a part-time job and maybe making smart investments early in your life.
You said having a part-time job and investing money is a way that you can earn. Yep. How do you earn, sweetie? Did you want to tell me? Huh?
You can earn by doing different kinds of services for people.
That's right. That's exactly right. Good job. Yeah. So how can you earn? Well, one way is maybe you get negotiating with your parents for an allowance if you take on some more responsibility around the house, right? So you can ask to take on maybe some roles in your home, and maybe your parents will pay you an allowance for that. And if you're smart, maybe you ask for an increase every year due to inflation, because inflation has been pretty high lately. Or by taking on more chores and responsibilities. It's sort of like a job. When you master something, you ask to do more, and when you get to do more, you get paid more, right? Or when you get a little older, you can have a part-time job. So my first part-time job was at McDonald's. I was a cashier. I was probably 16 years old. I did that for a while. And I had part-time jobs. I worked at Macy's for a while. I worked at a furniture store. I worked in the hospital accounting department. A lot of these I did when I was going to college, so I could have enough money for commuting expenses and buying books. So that's another way that you could earn an allowance, a part-time job. Maybe you can be an entrepreneur. Maybe some of you are entrepreneurs today and you don't even realize you're entrepreneurs. What could you do? Babysit? Does anybody here babysit? Yeah, you babysit? Who'd you babysit? Children? Are these relatives or neighbors? Neighbors. Well, good for you. You make a little money doing that? Well, there's some chocolate money. Maybe you can cut neighbor's lawn or cut your parents' lawn. It's a little lawn maintenance. Here we have a gal here on the screen. She is pet sitting and dog walking. A lot of people need that. Particularly, parents who work and your animals are home during the day and they need a walk in the middle of the day. Maybe you can start a little business. House sitting when people go out of town. Any other ideas? Anything anybody else does? Yeah.
Shovel snow, like around the neighborhood.
Great.
Could you invest into stocks?
Yes, you could, but you'd first need to earn the money to do it, right? Right? So you'd have to invest the money, you'd have to earn the money to be able to invest the money, right? Good job, Becky. Thank you. Love the participation, by the way. So you want to earn money, like you're going to do when you finish high school, or maybe when you're working in college. And then next you want to prepare a budget. You've got some money coming in, right? What do you want to do with that money that you have coming in? Well, first let's talk about what a budget is. It's just a plan. It's just a fancy word for a plan for managing your money. And it's usually prepared using a spreadsheet like Excel. And if you haven't used Excel, get a parent or teacher to help you with it. It's really easy. So how many people here use Excel? A lot of you? Good. Because as soon as you start college, they're going to expect you to be using Excel right away for probably most of your courses. So as you're preparing your budget, what should you include? Well, you want to include the money coming in, which are your cash receipts. And the first thing that you want to do is you want to do what I'll call pay yourself, right? So you have some money coming in. You want to take the first bundle of that and put it in an account for you. Don't spend it, save it. Because once you start saving it, then you'll be able to invest it, right? So pay yourself first. And then with what is left after that, decide what you need in terms of expenses. Those are your cash disbursements. And then any money that's left over at the end is usually added to savings, but you might want to use it for a goal. Maybe there's something you want to save for, right? Maybe it's a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch, or if you're a gal, maybe it's a special purse, right? Sometimes you are saving for something that is really important to you. So, once you start putting that money in a savings account, right, you're paying yourself, where do you save and how do you save? So I know that there are some parents in the room, so hopefully this will be helpful to them if they haven't done this already. But even if your parents aren't here, ask your parents to open up an account for you where you can deposit your savings, right? This is your first relationship with banking, right? It gets you in the habit of saving, depositing money, having a relationship with the banker. So if you ask your parents to open an account for you, it will be in the form of something called a custodial account. So your name will be on the account and your parents' name will be on the account. So it'll be, you'll hold the account together. But I'm sure your parents will, work with you on receipts and disbursements. And then when you turn 21, your parents' name will be removed from the account and you will have full control over it. So it's just a great way to get sort of your first start, if you will, in banking and begin to develop a little bit of a credit history, if you will. So if you don't have an account, talk with your parents about doing it because it's a wonderful way to start a banking relationship. And I know we were hoping PNC could be here today. They unfortunately they weren't able to make it, but like PNC is a wonderful bank to do this with. Right? They are very pro custodial accounts, working with students. They also work with a lot of college students. So I would encourage you to think about that. So how much do you save? I would really like to see you have a goal throughout your life to save at least 10 to 12% or more of your cash receipts and earnings. If you do that throughout your life, the chances are that you're going to have a very comfortable retirement. If you fall short of that, it may be a more difficult retirement and you might not be able to retire as early as you would. My goal for all of you, and this is hard when you're young, but it's to enjoy saving money more than you enjoy spending money, right? To sort of be a little squirrel who really likes saving your money. And then once you are working, once you're out in the work world, either after high school or after college, it's really important to have at least 3 to 6 months of savings on hand. What do I mean by that? So whatever your wages are, your first goal should to have 3 months of wages, 3 to 6 months of wages in your account. We'll call that an emergency fund or a liquidity fund in the event something unforeseen happens that requires a significant outlay of cash. I mean, sometimes we lose our jobs, right? I am told that in this day and age that you all will probably have maybe 12 jobs over the course of your lifetime, with several careers involved in that. None of us want to lose our jobs, but sometimes companies up and move to a different place or they shut down. And one of the reasons why you want to have this 3 to 6 months of money set aside is in the event something like that happens that you don't anticipate, you've given yourself a little bit of time to get back on your feet again. And then in addition, you can save for some things that you really want, right? You don't have to be so miserly that you don't have any fun at all. But you might want to save for something like a car. Maybe you want to save for college. I'm sure your parents would appreciate you helping them with that. Maybe you're going to save later for your wedding or a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. My husband and I, on our 25th wedding anniversary, we were blessed. We got to go to Hawaii. We had a once-in-a-lifetime vacation. Maybe you're saving to have children. Your parents will probably tell you that you are not cheap, right? It's very expensive to raise a child. They love you a lot. That's why they spend that money. Maybe you're saving for a house, right? Maybe you're saving for retirement. Anything else anybody would save for? Yeah.
Like debt or a friend or family's medical expenses?
Yeah. I don't know that you'd save for debt. Debt is borrowing money, not saving money. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, if you wanted to save to help a friend or a family with medical expenses in it.
I'd save to protect myself from costs that a business might incur.
Yeah, can you give me an example?
For example, if I started a business and then I somehow ended up in a liability issue, I'd have that piece of savings to help me out and get through it.
Yeah, kind of like a reserve fund, right? A just-in-case fund, right? So, you also need to manage your expenses. So I would encourage you to spend your money wisely and do not purchase things that you don't truly need, which is kind of easy to do. How can you do that? Well, before you make a purchase, I would encourage you to ask yourself this. Will I value that purchase in a month, or in 6 months, or in a year, right? Is it something that's really of lasting value to me, or is it a passing fad? Don't spend money just to have things. Spend money to bring things into your life that are going to be meaningful and lasting to you. And And then finally, after putting your money in savings and, excuse me, paying yourself, don't spend more money than you receive, right? You have to live within the means of your budget. So let's talk about use of credit cards. How many people in here use their parents' credit cards? Okay, this might be particularly important to parents who can help you with this. First of all, minors means someone under 18 in Maryland can't open a credit card in your own name, right? If you're under 18, you can't have your own credit card account. But parents, you can add minors as authorized users of your credit cards as early as the age of 13 for some credit card issuers. What does that mean? It means that your kids, or you all, right, can have a credit card with your name on it, right, that you can use, right, and the charges actually go to the account that your parents pay, but it can be in your name. Parents, note, however, you're responsible for the purchases made by the authorized minors. And one way to control that, I know that causes you a little concern, it caused me concern when I first sent my oldest child, my daughter, off to college. One way to control that is to put a relatively low limit on the credit card. So a lot of banks will do this, right? You open up an account, you get your child who's 13 or older as an authorized signer, their name is on the account, but you put on that particular account a really low limit. I don't know, maybe a couple of $100 or something like that. So you can make sure that they don't go a little too wild with the expenses. So what's the big advantage of that? Well, it provides some ease, right? You don't have to send your kids somewhere with a lot of cash. But one of the big advantages of adding a minor as an authorized user is that it helps to build their credit history. So in addition to building your credit history as parents, right, as authorized users of the account, you all will begin to build a credit history, which is going to be really important at the time that you want to buy or lease a car, right? Or get your own credit card only in your name, right? Or buy or lease a house or an apartment. So it's really, the sooner that your kids can start to get a credit history that's good, the better off they will be. And the cheaper the financing will be, interest rate on the loan. So a little bit about credit card payments. This is some advice. You should pay the full amount owed on every credit card statement, right? Late payments are subject to a financial penalty. It's usually a big late fee, and also interest accrues. Now let me talk a little bit about interest on a credit card. So I would strongly discourage you to use a credit card to borrow money to pay for something. Interest rates on some credit cards are over 30%, particularly on store credit cards. So I was aghast a few weeks back when my Nordstrom card got reissued to see that the rate of interest on that card was something like 32.65%. And I immediately cut up the card and threw it away. Right? I don't even want to be tempted to use that card because it has such a big interest rate. So credit cards are a very expensive form of credit, and I would discourage you for using. They're more of a convenience, right? That's what credit cards are for. It's easy to go and charge something. Maybe you have to buy several things during the month. The bill comes, you pay for the bill all at once. It's a little bit of a way to sort of float it for a little while so you're not paying for it. Maybe until the end of the month when you get paid or something like that. But I would only use credit cards as a convenience, not as a form of borrowing. It's probably the most expensive way you could ever choose to borrow money. Let me give you an example here at the bottom. If you were to charge $1,000 on a credit card, having an interest rate of 18%, which by the way is about the average on a credit card. It's about 18% a year, or 1.5% a year. And let's say you decide not to pay the whole credit card bill when it's due, and you make just the minimum payment of $25. a month. It will take you 5 years to pay off that $1,000 debt, right? And it will cost you, when you add up all the payments over those 5 years, more than $1,500. So you will spend $1,500 to buy $1,000 worth of things. That's really not a good scenario, is it? So you definitely don't want to use credit cards as a form of financing purchases. Try to pay the entire bill off when it comes, because it's very expensive otherwise. Now let's talk a little bit about investing. So you've saved some money. It's started to accumulate. If you have enough, excuse me, I would encourage you to talk to your parents about setting up a custodial investment account. So we talked about a custodial bank account. You can also set up a custodial investment account with somebody like Wells Fargo Advisors. So what kinds of investments are available to you? You should all be aware that investments that have low returns, meaning you don't make a whole lot of money from them, they make low returns because they have low risk, right? Those with high returns have high risk. Let's talk about the various forms of investment. One thing that you can invest in is U.S. Treasury securities. By the way, you can buy U.S. Treasury bills, notes, and bonds yourself. Just go to USTreasuryDirect.com, parents. They're very easy to buy. Your stockbroker doesn't talk to you about it because they don't get a commission from it, right? You buy it directly. These are the safest investments in the world. They only earn about the rate of inflation for short-term investments and about 3% more on long-term investments. So the good news about investing in these securities is they're very low risk. The bad news is you're not going to get a return that's a whole lot better than the rate of inflation. The next thing that you can invest in are certificates of deposit. Nice thing about certificates of deposit is they're insured up to $250,000, meaning if the bank were to go bankrupt, right, as long as your certificate of deposit is $250,000 or less, you will get your money back. You never have to worry about the bank losing your money. And they earn slightly less than the rate of inflation because they are so well protected. Then the next up the risk change would be corporate bonds or bond funds, and these earn about 3 to 4% more than inflation on average. So these are a little bit riskier, but keep in mind with a bond, the company guarantees that they're going to pay you back, right? You have a contract that says, you're investing in us, right? We're going to pay you a return in the form of interest, and we're going to pay your money back when the bond matures, right? So they're still relatively safe. And then at the very high end is the thing that probably interests all of you the most, right? Which is a stock investment, a single stock or a stock fund. And the great thing about stocks is over long periods of time, like 75 to 100 years, they tend to earn about 8 to 12% per year more than inflation. So you're typically going to make a lot more money investing in a stock than you are a bond or a CD or a treasury bill. But what's the issue with a stock? Yeah.
Highly risky.
Yeah, it can be very, very risky, right? Because you know how with a bond, you sign a contract which says, the company says, we will pay you back. With a stock, when you buy it, what do you get? Nothing, right? That share of Amazon stock that you bought today, what's a Saturday, I know, but let's assume you bought it earlier this week. In theory, on Monday, it could go to zero, right? If it performs badly. And then what position would you be in then? Not a great position, right? Wouldn't be very good. So stocks can earn very strong rates of return, but you have to remember that they are risky, okay? So what do I mean when I mentioned to you earlier on that list that I also want you to manage your debt? Well, it means that I only want to see you borrow for things that are long-range purchases that you typically can't buy with an upfront payment. What kinds of things am I talking about? Well, usually most of us don't have the money to pay cash for a car or cash for a house. So it's pretty typical for you to use debt to buy a car or buy a house. And that's okay, right? It's a long-term purchase. One of the things that some people will miss, however, is that a car depreciates in value, while real estate increases in value, right? The longer you hold a car, the less it's worth. The longer you hold real estate, the more it's worth, right? And so unless you're wealthy, I wouldn't suggest that you buy an expensive car because it's gonna depreciate. I would suggest that you take the money that you were gonna spend on a more expensive car and use it to buy a more expensive house.
So like, why would real estate go up in value? Because can it possibly, could possibly the land could, become uninhabitable eventually later on?
I would say that it's rare when that happens. Most people wouldn't build a house on a piece of land that in the future could become uninhabitable. And keep in mind, land is a scarce commodity, right? Unless Elon Musk finds a way for us to occupy Mars, right? We're not gonna get any more land, right? There's only so much land on the earth, so it's in limited supply, right? And it tends to increase by at least the rate of inflation. It's just much more valuable. Whereas with a car, right? How many miles can you get from a car these days? Maybe 150 if you're really lucky, right? 150,000, yeah, if you're really lucky. You might drive a car for 10 years, right?
And sell it
I
off.
drive a Honda, it has about 110,000 miles. I'm still hoping to drive it for a couple more years, right? I'm of that philosophy that you don't buy an expensive car, you invest the money in your house, right? But at the end, when the car has 200,000 miles on it, it can't run anymore, what's it worth? A goose egg. But what's the house worth? A lot more. So my suggestion to all of you is spend less on your car, spend more on your house, right? And you spend a lot more time in your house anyway, so buying an expensive car is not advisable. Keep your car for as long as you can until repairs and maintenance begin to approach the level of a car payment. When you start spending that much money on the repairs, it's probably time to buy a new car. And then protect your assets from risk. Most of the time we're required to do this with our most expensive assets. So you can't drive a car, right, without insurance on a car, right? You have to buy car insurance. And if you're taking out a loan to buy your house, your bank who lends the money to you will require you to have insurance on the house. As a matter of fact, I think most community homeowner associations now actually require you to maintain insurance on your house. And what's really good about insurance is you pay a relatively small amount for insurance to protect you against some kind of a catastrophic level of loss, right? God forbid you have a fire in your house, right? If you maintain fire insurance, right, and something happens and the house is severely damaged or burns down, your insurance will pay you most of what you will need to rebuild the house again. So that's the advantage, is you've paid a little bit for it all along to be able to protect you in the event of a catastrophe going forward. And finally, if you can afford it, give back to causes that are important to you. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is be sure that any organization to which you contribute money or assets is well managed, right? Some nonprofits will spend a lot of their money on administrative costs and not the cause that they are theoretically, trying to help. And probably about 10% is probably a reasonable amount for the people who run the charity or the not-for-profit. You want to look for charities that spend at least 90% of what they take in, right, on the cause that they are advocating. That would be the mark of a very good charity or not-for-profit. And now just a couple of important lessons in basic finance. So this is taken actually at Loyola. I teach entry-level finance to college freshmen and sophomores, and I also teach capstone finance to seniors, and I teach graduate level finance. But I always start my finance classes with this. I tell my students that virtually everything in finance can be described in 3 words. These 3 words, they're the key to all things financially related. The first word is more. Do you want $1 or do you want $100? bucks, I'll take the more. We want more money, not less money. Do we want it sooner or do we want it later? Why might we not want it later?
Oh, right,
If you get it sooner, what can you do with it?
save it.
Save it and invest it, right? Right, so sooner, we want money sooner, because the sooner we get it, the sooner we can invest it and make more money, right? That's our goal, we're greedy, right? We want to take that money and make more money. And then finally, safer. What do I mean by that? Given the choice between a safe and a risky investment with the same return, we will always choose the safe investment, right? So finance is three things: more money, want my money sooner, and I want it to be safer, all other things being equal. That describes everything in finance is related to one of those three concepts. So I want to talk here towards the end of something called compound interest. Y'all heard of compound interest? This is like the magic of finance. So compound interest is defined as interest earned or paid on interest, right? This is how people are able to retire with large sums of money. So here you can see that if you invest $10,000, right, in the first year at an interest rate of 3%, with compound interest, you earn more than $300 per year after the first year. So if you didn't have compound interest in this column over here, you would see 300, 300, 300, 300, 300, right? But because we take the $300 that we have at the end of the first year, we not only invest the $10,000, now we can invest the $300 as well, right? And we're gonna earn interest on the $10,000 at 300, but we're also gonna earn 3% interest on the 300. So in the second year, instead of earning 300, we earn 309. And when you see that happen over time, right, you can see that what would have been $1,500 at 3% with simple interest, using compound interest, you get $1,593. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're working with large sums of money, it can become very, very significant. So here's an example with $100,000 instead of $10,000. You can see that you end up with almost $1,000 more at the end, $16,000 versus $15,000, because you were earning interest on your interest. And that, again, that is known as compound interest, and it's one of the most important facets of finance. So, I know you all hear a lot about the stock market, so I know I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the stock market today. So what exactly is the stock market? I'm sorry? In simple terms, it's a place where people buy and sell shares or stocks of companies, essentially owning a tiny piece of those companies, right? And the price of the shares fluctuates based on supply and demand, and investors aim to make a profit by buying low and selling high. As I mentioned earlier, buying and holding stocks involves risks, as there's no guarantee that you will make or not lose money on your investment, okay? So it can be fun, it can be interesting to watch. Sometimes it's a good investment, sometimes it's not. You just need to understand that when you invest in the stock market, you are definitely taking on risk. So why is buying stock attractive to some investors? Well, over the long term, as I mentioned earlier, stocks generate significantly higher returns than other investments. So some investors view the risk of investing in stocks as worth the reward. And I would suggest to you that over the long term, you're gonna benefit a lot more from investing in stocks than investing in bonds, right? But what I would really encourage you to do is thinking about investing in both, right? That's called diversification, right? You have some stocks in your portfolio, you have some bonds in your portfolio, they have different levels of risk and return, and they tend to offset one another. Today, most trading in stocks takes place electronically rather than in a physical location. So, for many years, you would go to the New York Stock Exchange floor and the traders would be yelling at each other with the sell price and the buy price. Not so much anymore. It's all done electronically. Investors can earn profits from stock investments through price appreciation, and also some stocks also pay dividends in the form of cash or additional shares of stock. So sometimes if you own a share of stock, the company will make a cash dividend payment to you for owning the stock. Or they will pay a stock dividend to you for owning the stock with additional shares of stock. So the value of shares traded in all of the stock markets across the globe is about $117 trillion. And about 62 trillion of it relates to companies here in the US. So about half. On the other hand, why are bonds attractive to some investors? So some investors prefer to buy the bonds or mix bonds with stock in their investment portfolio. As I mentioned, they're less risky than stocks because companies sign agreements that they'll pay investors the interest rate on the bonds and pay the principal or the amount that they owe back at the end. While surprising to some, actually the bond market is much larger than the stock market, right? Most people need to borrow more money than they need to raise in ownership capital, so that makes sense. And the value of the worldwide bond market is about $141 trillion, so these are very big markets. And so finally, I'm gonna leave you today with a compound interest question. It's this: let's assume that you are starting to work, you're 22, you just graduated from college, right? And you'd like to put enough money in the bank every year to have $1 million at the time that you retire. If you assume that you're going to be investing for 46 years, right, from age 22 to age 68, and that your annual compound return on your investment is 5%, how much money would you have to put in the bank each year to have $1 million by the time that you're 68? And it's a surprisingly small amount of money. So this is something for you to think about when you get your first job. It's a little under $6,000 a year. So once you start working, if you can manage to put $6,000 of your salary a year, right, into something, maybe some mix of stocks and bonds to diversify, by the time that you retire, you can be a millionaire. Something for each year. So I hope you've learned a little bit today and you've had a little fun, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Yeah. So why did you stop being an accountant? Like, what were the cons of it? Because I've heard a lot about it just being like a really time-consuming job, and it makes me like rethink my own decisions.
Yeah, well, they have increased over the past decade or so. They have increased the requirements to become a CPA. So now you have to have 5 years of college instead of 4 years of college. And you actually have to have an internship with an accounting firm. That was a decision that the accounting profession made. I'm not going to say that I necessarily agree with it, but they've made it much tougher to become a CPA. So be prepared for 5 years of college instead of 4 years of college. My brother-in-law was a very successful accountant, right? He worked for a company called, have you heard of EY, Ernst & Young? It's one of the world's largest public accounting firms. It was the only job he ever had. He retired from Ernst & Young a few years ago. And by the way, he's very successful. He's on the board of T. Rowe Price. He's had some big clients like Lockheed Martin, so he's had some very impressive business. So you can do very well financially, right? The thing that made it less attractive for me in terms of thinking about accounting and finances, accounting tends to be a little bit more focused on things that are recorded and are backward looking, right? And book value, meaning what it was worth at the time that you did the transaction. What I love about finances, it's all about market values, closing transactions with an eye to what something is worth today and what it will be worth in the future. And for me, that was much more exciting. But that being said, you can have a wonderful career in accounting. And by the way, I think I'm a much better finance person because of the time that I spent in accounting. Because I can probably read a set of financial statements and understand how a company is performing better because of the time that I spend in accounting. You'll get some of that in finance, but you won't get as much of it as you would as if you started in accounting first. So both are good, it's just, they're just different. Yeah.
If you were to like, potentially go into like this field, what skill would you say would be next attached? Like if you're trying to like, even as a student, like develop some, like, I don't know, focus on math or specific areas, what would you?
I will tell you, you raise a good point, because I was not great in math when I was in high school. I was what you might call a math phobe. Does anybody here a math phobe? I was a little bit afraid of math. And I would say in probably 98% of most things that you do in finance, you're either adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, maybe you'll use an exponent or a square root. Literally, that's about how complicated it gets. It doesn't really get that much more complicated. So I would say in terms of your skills, if they offer like bookkeeping and accounting in your classes, I would encourage you to take that because it gets you comfortable with how financial statements work. You are at the age right now where you can get probably either a free subscription or like for maybe $1 for 10 weeks, a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. I would encourage you to read the Wall Street Journal every day, right? And if you subscribe, by the way, if you don't want to read the whole thing, they will send you daily in your email the 10 most important stories. That's all the time you want to spend, you can focus on them. I'm a little old-fashioned, I admit. I still get the Wall Street Journal delivered to my house. And I do look at it cover to cover every day, but there is a column that goes down the left side which summarizes the key events in business and the key world events. And I would encourage you to read that. And I would also say, don't be overly focused on your hard skill classes. All those other skills are really important too. So, one of the things that I'm happy to tell you that we hear a lot from employers about Loyola students is that we're a liberal arts institution. So we require 2 semesters of theology, 2 semesters of philosophy, a language, an English, a history, a pre-calc class, right? And we require all those other classes too, things like data analytics and marketing and all that, but employers not only want to know that you're really good technically, they want to know that you can read and write and communicate, right? That you are pleasant to work with. One of the things that employers focus on a lot is they'll interview somebody who's really good technically, but they'll have to make an assessment as to whether that's somebody that they want to sit in a room with for 8 hours a day. Right? So how pleasant are you to be with, right? How much do you pay attention to what's going on in the world around you? How much are you of an optimist, right? A person who's a can-do person, right? Who is always trying to find a way as opposed to being a little bit, I'm not sure that can be done. So all of those skills are really important. You don't have to be overly focused on math, right? Take your math classes and try and do well. You're probably going to need to get up to the pre-calc or the calc level when you're in college, at least the first level. So you're going to have to get through that. But once you're through that, right, you just want to, focus on, all of your skills. I would strongly urge you, if you're not spending time on Excel, right, spreadsheet applications are really important. And if you can find ways to do a little bit of programming or data analysis hither and thither, those are important skills too. But you don't have to be like super smart, off the chart, engineering quality math whiz to be successful in finance.
Well, I'm 17 and I wanted to start working over the summer, but I turned 18 in November, so I wanted to know if, when I pay taxes, do I have to pay taxes based on my work and off the rest of the month, or just the rest of the month?
You only pay taxes on the money that you earn, right? So if you're not earning money that month, you're not paying taxes that month, right?
In general, for someone who's interested in pursuing a career in finance, what's the biggest piece of advice that you would give?
Oh. Read the Wall Street Journal. Try to learn Excel. some of the things I just talked about. If you're offered a bookkeeping class, take a bookkeeping class. If you have a little money to invest in the stock, talk to your parents about doing it, and then actually follow that company and read. One of the things that I don't think young people probably do enough of today is actually read, right? So, follow the company. When the company releases its earnings, read its press release. When it releases its financial statements, read them from front to back. If you have questions about them, talk to one of your professors at school who would be more than happy to teach you. Call me, I'm happy to talk with you about it. So I think the thing that you can do is do everything you can to expose yourself to business and business processes.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I can ask you afterwards.
No, you can ask me now, please.
So I had a couple questions, but is life insurance a good investment? Because I noticed it wasn't here. Is that kind of the thing that you do after you've done all of these other kind of diversified investments?
I think life insurance is really important, particularly in families where there is one wage earner who makes a lot more than the other wage earner, right? Because if that person passes, you're gonna need the life insurance to help you. I think it's also helpful if you have a mortgage, right? I'm at the age right now where, my house is paid off, right? I have a decent amount of investments, right? My children are through college, they're both out on their own. I don't need life insurance anymore. So I think it's important when you're younger. I think it becomes less important as your mortgage is paid off, you develop a level of wealth, and your children are out on their own. Yeah.
And the second question was about managing mortgages.
Uh-huh.
So I have a friend who puts all of their savings into their mortgage,
Mhm.
and they don't do other investments, and that's their way of investing it. Is that
Yeah.
a wise investment, or is it still better to kind of just pay your mortgage and then
Well,
invest otherwise?
to some degree, it depends upon the interest rate on their mortgage, and so if they were one of the people who, 5 years ago got a really great interest rate on their mortgage, 3%, 4%, personally, I would not be prepaying my mortgage because I can invest in the stock market and probably earn between 8 and 12, right? So I'd probably rather invest the money and make a little money than pay down the debt. Now, maybe they have the good fortune of being able to do both. It doesn't sound like that. Or maybe they just like the security of not having a mortgage anymore. But if you were gonna base the decision solely on finance, I would say take some of that money. By the way, one of the things I didn't talk about today is 401k plans. So when you all graduate, right, and you're in your first job, the first thing that you wanna do with that 5 or 10 or 12% that I told you to put away is put it in your company's 401k plan. Because what companies do is usually the first 5% that you put in that plan, they will take that 5% and they will match it, right? So if you put in $5,000, they'll put in $5,000 on top of your $5,000. Well, where else can you get an investment that returns you 100%? Right? You're getting a 100% return on your investment by investing in your 401k. So I would really encourage someone like that. I would probably be, and by the way, the money that you put in your 401k, you don't pay any taxes on it. Right? That's all deemed, right? You have to pay taxes on it when you pull it out, when you retire, but it'll be 45 years before you ever have to pay taxes on that money. So it's great because one, you get a 100% return on your investment because the company matches what you put in, and then you don't have to pay taxes on any of the money that you put in your account. So it's a really good thing. Other questions? Yeah.
Would you be able to briefly talk about index funds?
Yeah, so index funds are designed to mirror some index. Let me give you an example. So there's a fund called the SPY, SPY, right? And it mirrors the performance of the S&P 500. So it would probably be impossible for you to go out on your own and invest in every stock in the S&P 500 in the exact proportions that they exist in the market. If you think that the market is going to continue to do well, and by the way, over long periods of time that it does, the advantage of an index fund is it will put your money in as if you were investing in the entire market. And the beauty of that is you diversify your risk because you are investing in every stock in the stock market and are not subject to that one-day fall in NVIDIA or Tesla, right? You've invested in everything. And so, yeah, you get a little bit of the stuff that goes down, but you also get the advantage of the things that goes up. So the beauty of these index funds is that they mirror the performance of some metric that someone has calculated for the entire market. And by the way, they're pretty cheap, so there's not a huge administrative fee that you're charged. It's usually, less than 1%, sometimes less than half of 1% for somebody to invest that money on your behalf. So I really encourage my kids with their savings to actually invest in the S&P 500 because if you believe the history that over 75 to 100 years that stocks are going to outperform, right, bonds by 6%, 10%, 12% over the long term, it's a real good thing to do. So I'm a big advocate of index funds. You guys have asked some great questions.
I just want to make, it's just a thought that, I know investment in stock is risky, but we are looking for long term.
Right.
Right? If we are investing in it for long term, we can put a little money and buy small amount of stocks.
That's right.
And that can be helpful too, right?
Oh, very, yeah, because
Yeah.
you're sort of what they call dollar averaging.
Yeah.
Right, yes, that's a great way to invest, actually, so. Yeah, if you're invested if you're looking at the long term,
Yeah.
you definitely wanna be invested in stocks. So if you have 30 years, 40 years until you retire, probably 60-40, 70-30 is a good mix, 70% stocks, 30% bonds. If you're like me and you're a little bit closer to retirement, right, you don't wanna be taking that risk on your stocks. So I'm more heavily invested in bonds than stocks. So it changes as you get older and your risk profile is a little bit different. Yeah, but no, that's a great idea. It's great if you can get on a path where you can buy a little bit at a time. Other questions? We've been a great group, thank you. I've enjoyed it. Sune, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And he has some other fun things planned for you, so I hope you'll stay around for it.